Hello, Brubs. We're back with So the Witch Won't Eat Me. Fantasy and the Child's Fear of Infanticide by Dorothy Blockhead. Yeah, she's a blockhead. Since I'm going to the thrift store later today, I don't know what time it is. What is it, 1:30 in the morning? Before I go to work, I'm going to do this now, so I don't have to worry about it. Let's get back to this chapter. Chapter is this 10 or 11? 10. As he related one incident of theft after another during the following months, it became apparent that there was a definite pattern to his stealing, and that each time it was precipitated by an incident that filled him with rage and that he experienced as humiliating. Whenever it occurred, for whatever reason, his only recourse was to steal. In his words, it was like a shot in the arm. He himself compared it to an alcoholic's drive to drink. The aftermath, as his note had indicated, was also inevitably depression and suicidal wishes. Although I succeeded in helping him track down the motivating cause, in incident after incident, one particular event finally enabled him to achieve effective insight and to break the pattern of his response. His mother had given a party to which she invited a friend and the friend's daughter, who was Johnny's age. In the course of the evening, Johnny was called upon to play. Each time the girl belittled his performance, asserting that her brother was a better violinist. During his recital of this experience, Johnny maintained a very friendly manner and reiterated how nice the girl was. When he came to the end of the story, however, he related that he had later gone into the bedroom where the coats and pocketbooks had been left and stolen $10 from one of them. The theft appeared to be completely unmotivated. Further questioning, however, revealed that the purse from which he had taken the money belonged to the girl's mother. The effect of the revelation on Johnny was astounding, since he had been so unaware of his response to the girl's insulting comments. His sudden impulse to steal had been completely mystifying. Now, finally, he realized that his feelings of rage and humiliation were so intolerable to him that he repressed and dissociated them. It had not occurred to him that he stole for a reason, not as he had thought, merely because he was just a cheap character. For the first time, he began to understand his behavior and to develop the beginning of feelings of self-esteem. I'm going to say that Johnny knew exactly what he did and that he just blocked it out because he didn't want to deal with the fact that he was getting revenge. But, yeah. More puzzling than his stealing was his investment in self-defeat. Although I was very familiar with that phenomenon, I had not encountered before. Sound like a damn lion outside the window. Either the scale or the particular form it took in Johnny's case. The problem that initially brought him into treatment persisted through most of the years that I knew Johnny. At first, it appeared to resemble the usual need to establish worthlessness as a means of justifying the parents' hostile feelings, and so maintain the hope of eventually securing their love with its concomitant dependency needs and its avoidance of success. In retrospect, I now realize it was the extraordinary range of Johnny's talents that repeatedly obscured its meaning, even in high school. My first intimation of something strange occurred during the first period of Johnny's analysis when he was clearly on his way to becoming a professional violinist and suddenly decided to switch to the clarinet. I suspected that he was avoiding success for the usual reason, the justification of his mother's rejection of him. But I listened to his rhapsodies about the clarinet and had to admit they seemed convincing. In addition, it soon became apparent that he was equally successful in his choice of a new instrument. I then lost track of him for a time, but had the impression that he was pursuing his career. When he reappeared after a 5-year hiatus, however, I discovered that he had abandoned all thought of music, that he had been married and divorced, and that he had been earning his living as a mechanic. Soon after his re-entry into analysis, however, he began to take music lessons again, this time in singing. And once more, fucking guy could start a band at least, and once more to train seriously. He stated that since he had been a little boy, His one ambition was to be a singer, and at last he was going to gratify it. He spoke with some bitterness of his adoptive parents' early disapproval of a singing career and their successful efforts at preventing it. He described once more with convincing eloquence the feeling of fulfillment he derived from singing, and once more he underwent intensive training and showed an equal aptitude for this new field of expression. He appeared to have some intimation of an unconscious design. However, when he noted in his journal, and the stage lights are up once again, and the new act is about to begin. Perhaps because Johnny had already resolved some of his problems and was much more in touch with his feelings and for the first time was in continuous psychoanalytic treatment over a long period, his pursuit of singing not only finally revealed the underlying dynamics that had led him to abort his previous careers, but exposed the unconscious fantasy that had directed him. Johnny was also approaching 30, and the sense, maybe he's Johnny Rotten, the sense that time was running out also began to goad him. For a while, Johnny was once more carried along by the intoxication of developing his new talent. In less than a year, however, he noted in his journal, my teacher again said, "You are going to be a singer." Anyone else with this news would be ecstatic. No. It seems as though with all the fighting I have been doing to avoid doing well has not worked. Such despair. Feel like running, hiding, killing myself. A little over a month later, he noted, my lesson was great. I feel it getting closer and closer. The dream of really singing is so near. It is as though not too long ago I had wondered what it was that I was going after, but now I have the tiger by the tail, and I shall not let loose. Surprisingly, however, in the same entry, he added, I wanted to register for an acting class today, but I did not. Could have been a singer or actor. It soon became clear that history was repeating itself. The entries in Johnny's journal during the next months read, today my teacher said that I should start singing songs. This scared the daylights out of me because it meant that I was getting closer and closer to being able to sing. A month later, this past week has been very difficult. It has evoked all my fears of succeeding. I sometimes want to believe that this is all a plot to destroy myself. And still later, this past Friday, I had a very good lesson and also taped it. Saturday morning, I listened to it. From that time until this evening, I have been in and out of a depression. What the cause, I am not sure. It could be that I liked my voice. Two, that I didn't, and I was disappointed that it still sounded like me. And since I hate myself, that was all I needed. Three, that it really didn't displease me. I cannot get over that you and my teacher liked that sound. I sound just like me, and I hate it. I wanted another voice. The following week produced, I want to give up singing. Why? I do not know. When I think of my singing, I get very melancholy. Can it be just that I heard my voice? I have no right to like anything about myself because I am not worthy. Why? Because my mother did not find me worthy enough to keep me. Never before had Johnny pursued a career with such determination or with such awareness of his unconscious drive to defeat himself. His fight to win this time became so intense that the unconscious opposition required a new form, and Johnny began to speak of my little axe lady. He wrote, when I practice today, I must do well even though I don't want to. I must now exert more pressure against the axe. She knows that I'm gaining strength. There is one way to beat her, and that is write about my feelings. Talk them out with you. She depends on my not expressing feelings, and thus is able to continue the confusion. By bringing thoughts and feelings to the surface, I steal the show from her. She was not easily defeated, however. I finished my lesson. It was one of the best in a long time. I forced her out. She tried to ruin it, but I did not allow it. On the following day, I started thinking, Here I am, so talented I could act just as well as anybody. This is when she reared her ugly head and tried to depress me. But again, I fought back and won. I am a singer. Remember, Johnny? She, the fiend, would love the fiend would love a whirl at disaster and destruction, like put a little torment in your life. She thrives on self-destruction. Friday had a great lesson. So on Monday, I managed to do everything wrong. She was doing a great job. I felt her presence so clearly. She was in the same room. So today I must not allow it to happen. I find it difficult to begin. I can stay to say the past lesson was the best I ever had. I can start to say the past lesson was the best I ever had. We made a tape, had some fantastic sounds. The first time I played it back, I was very worried. I did not like it much. I was surprised it sounded so well. I must learn to really like and to accept myself, my sound. I must again be very careful today when I practice. I must not undo. Like, not hate. I have just finished practicing. I didn't do too bad. I tried to follow things up a few times, but pulled myself out of it. But I did ask myself, when I am practicing, why am I working to become a singer? That's enough to discourage anyone who's practicing anything. If I don't practice, I feel like killing, destroying myself, wasting my life. If I do practice, I get depressed when I improve and get all hung up over it. Some of the old ways of she working on me have been abandoned by her. Now, and more powerful guises are being used. She is putting up a death struggle to kill me. It is hard to believe I can hate myself so much and still know that I am not a bad person. It all reverts to lack of love. The child saying that maybe the reason for me not being loved is because I do not deserve it. The I am no good. My ears do not want to accept the sound. They rebel against the past. They do not want him, the unloved, unworthy, hated person to emerge. I began to feel the pains of this boy who couldn't find love. Who, if he were anybody else, a girl, rich, he would indeed be loved. If he were dark, if he had dark hair and dark eyes. Yesterday and this morning I hit myself unmercifully. The ex-ladies scored. The acting class to which Johnny had referred from time to time finally materialized, although I clearly recognized once again the presence of the unconscious need to defeat himself. I was frankly puzzled by certain features of its expression. Usually, in my experience, self-defeat has taken the form of not permitting achievement in any area or of restricting its scope. To allow one's talent to be developed to a point of professional competence and then abruptly to abandon that career for a new one was unprecedented. Johnny himself offered the usual explanation in another connection. When, noting his compulsion to lose in tennis, he asked, "Could it be that I lose because when you lose, you are taken care of, just like a child?" Since most children who have been deprived equate being cared for with being loved, independence, or success, frequently means abandoning all hope, Johnny developed the theme still further. If I were to lose legitimately, he wrote, I would know it was because I tried everything. But my opponent was better. To try everything and to lose on a deeper level meant giving up hope. In most such instances, the issue that is being decided unconsciously is one of life or death. It was still not apparent, however, why Johnny threw himself into perfecting one career after another, only to abandon it at the point of realization. As his conflict about singing began to grow more intense, I again called to his attention the pattern that I observed. And just before his actual switch to acting, it finally hit home. It would be difficult to communicate the sense of shock with which I heard Johnny finally reveal his secret fantasy during one session. Whenever I think of making my debut, I picture the audience. Everybody is applauding, and suddenly my mother stands up and comes forward to acknowledge me. At last, it all became clear. Johnny had not been able at any point and still could not allow the debut to take place because he knew the fantasy would never be realized. In his early years, as the possibility of returning to his foster parents gradually disappeared, he had defended himself against the terror that had followed his violent separation from them, with the fantasy that if only he could make himself visible to his real mother and prove that he was worthy, he would be claimed. When his adopted parents offered him violin lessons, he unconsciously seized on them as an opportunity to achieve visibility and proceeded to work toward that goal. At another point, he surprised me by coming in with the shortest crew cut I had ever seen. Again, although it was an unusual hairstyle at that time, with his handsome features and well-shaped head, it was becoming. Only later did he reveal that his unconscious design was to make himself more recognizable to his real mother, who had seen him only as a baby, when of course he had had little hair. Following the revelation of his fantasy, he now wrote, "Here I am in music, and want and am driven, attracted to acting for the first time in a situation I don't feel. I'm copying out on myself. I am being drawn towards it, and I am going to follow it. I will try not to do it destructively. My acting teacher feels great things are in store for me. I do not interpret this as fame, glory, or such, but as aiming at myself. And because of that, boy, am I happy hearing that I feel myself truly in that direction. And not only am I anxious for ends, but am delighted with the journey itself, as though the journey is the happiness." What's really ironic in this whole scenario is that for this guy to make it as an actor or a musician of any sort is pretty damn hard. I mean, to become famous. I mean, you could probably make it in the symphony orchestra, but did she really know music as well as she thought she did? Anyway, his new emphasis on the journey rather than on the end suggests the dimensions of the complicated task that still lay before him. Although his statement is a conscious acknowledgement of the exposure of his unconscious fantasy and of his abandonment of his investment in directing all his energy toward the goal of winning his mother's love, it implies that he had not yet found any other motivation for achieving success. To what extent Johnny's problems were caused by his mother's abandonment of him at birth, and how much the agency contributed through its handling of him, is a matter for speculation. The original assignment to a foster home that, after 4.5 years, was judged unsuitable raises questions about the method of selecting foster parents. The omission of any apparent instruction to those parents concerning the revelation of their status to Johnny was a major factor in his later confusion. In addition, the suddenness and the violence with which the agency carried out the separation produced a trauma from which Johnny never recovered. The extent of Johnny's self-destructiveness and self-defeat was a measure of the intensity of the struggle to remain alive under the condition thus created. The agency's belated judgment of the foster parents catapulted him in a state of terror into a world with neither parents nor relatives, except for the defenses that the care of his foster parents had helped him develop. The very foundations for survival appeared to have been undermined. He therefore had to employ all the ingenuity his psyche could muster in order to stay alive. Not only did he find it necessary to assume responsibility for his abandonment, a need shared by all abandoned children, in order to promote the illusion that if they changed, their mothers would want them, but in addition, he had to transform his personality in order to win new parents. We also cannot underestimate the effect on Johnny of the violence of his separation from his foster parents. It is possible that he later experienced the violence as coming not only from them but also from his real mother. Maintaining feelings of worthlessness in order both to justify them and to hold out the hope of eventually being loved was therefore not sufficient. In addition, he had to resort to self-destructive behavior involving self-abuse and suicidal acts. On a conscious level, he endowed himself with supernatural powers, and on an unconscious one, he defended himself with a fantasy that made it possible to remain alive. Since he felt that his life depended on his mother's finding and acknowledging him, he repeatedly engaged in extraordinary efforts to distinguish himself by proving his worth and by being seen. Because unconsciously he knew his fantasy would never be realized, however, he had to abort every career before the fantasy could be tested. When he felt he was actually coming close to that point. The danger to his life of exposing the fantasy required the additional creation of an inner voice, his axe lady. Her function of discouraging his efforts at success appeared on the surface to be destructive, since he felt that his life depended on maintaining his fantasy of being acknowledged by his mother. However, the axe lady was another desperate attempt on the part of his psyche to enable him to survive. We can only speculate about the effectiveness of psychoanalytic treatment in early childhood in resolving the fantasy that later caused so much havoc in Johnny's life. Once the fantasy had become unconscious, a major task of psychoanalytic treatment was to enable Johnny to develop sufficient ego strength to face the reality of his mother's abandonment of him and of her absolute rejection. Only then was he finally able to allow the fantasy to surface so that he could begin to relinquish it. I mean, Johnny was in therapy for what, years, and then he took a 5-year hiatus, then he came back. And I understand that therapy does help some people, but wouldn't you just tell, hey, Johnny, get the fuck over it? Instead of waiting 7 years while this guy's suicidal and trying to figure out exactly why. Just say, hey, your mother was a piece of garbage. You gotta live, Bubba. You gotta live. Your mother is gone and she's garbage. It's not that hard to say, buddy. Anyway, no one should listen to me. Don't subscribe. Don't push the like button. If you do, I pity you. But if you don't, I also pity you. So do what you gotta do. That's the end of chapter 10. Goodbye, bruv. Goodbye.